In June 2014, a 24-year-old young man walked into the White House. He moved with a slight difficulty, the result of nearly 3 years of surgeries and rehabilitation. His face carried scars that no surgery could completely erase. His right eye was made of glass. The President of the United States was in the room. The cameras were on. The nation was watching. When the President began to speak, he said something no one in the room expected to hear. Kyle doesn't remember what he did that day. Silence. He has no memory of the moment that brought him here, of the second that changed everything. He simply doesn't remember. But the men who were with him on that rooftop in Afghanistan remember. The doctors who brought him back to life 3 times remember. And his best friend, the man who is alive because Kyle did what he did, will carry that memory for the rest of his life. This is the story of William Kyle Carpenter, and of a second he will never remember, but that America will never forget. William Kyle Carpenter was born on October 17, 1989, in Jackson, Mississippi. He grew up in Flowood and later in Gilbert, South Carolina, small towns where everyone knows each other, where football is almost a religion, and where hard work is the most important value a family can pass down from generation to generation. His father Jim and his mother Robin raised 3 children, Kyle and his younger twin brothers. It was the kind of family that had dinner together every day, where parents showed up to every football game, every graduation, every moment that mattered. Robin later said that Kyle was always the kind of son who made everyone around him feel better just by being there. Kyle was outgoing, generous, incapable of pretending he was okay when he wasn't, and incapable of pretending he wasn't okay when he was. Authentic. Completely authentic. Football was his passion. His twin brothers looked up to him. At school, he was the kind of kid everyone wanted around. Not because he tried to be popular, but because he genuinely cared about the people around him. At 19, Kyle made a decision that changed the course of his life and deeply surprised his mother. He wanted to enlist in the United States Marine Corps, the Marines. Robin tried to dissuade him. She presented arguments, asked questions, tried to make him think twice. Kyle looked at her and said a single sentence, a sentence Robin Carpenter repeated in every interview afterward, because she could never get it out of her head. "Mom, if I don't do this, it will be someone else's son who does." She had nothing left to say. In February 2009, at 19, Kyle enlisted. In July 2009, he completed training at Parris Island, one of the toughest and most demanding in the world. Every recruit who enters Parris Island leaves different. Kyle left as a Marine. In July 2010, at just 20 years old, he was assigned to Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines. Destination: Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The most dangerous region in the country, the epicenter of Taliban resistance, where Marines woke up to AK-47 fire as their alarm clock. It was in Afghanistan that Kyle met Nick Eufrazio. The two became inseparable almost immediately. They patrolled together, slept in the same barracks, made jokes about the heat, the dust, the bad food, covered each other on every mission. There is a kind of friendship that only exists in war zones. When you know that the man beside you is literally the difference between you making it home or not, something changes. The friendship becomes something closer than any word can describe. It's not just a friend, it's a brother you chose, in a place where choice cost everything. Kyle said about Nick in an interview, "He was my reference point. On every patrol I knew where he was. I loved him like a brother. If something had happened to him and I could have done something, I don't think I could live with that." In November 2010, after 4 months of deployment in Afghanistan, Kyle and Nick received a mission, along with the rest of their platoon, to establish a forward patrol base in a village in the Marja district, called by the Marines Patrol Base Dakota. A routine mission. Dangerous, like all of them, but routine. The village was located in an area the Marines nicknamed Shady, Shadier, and Shadiest. The name said everything. As soon as they arrived, the attacks began. 2 Marines were wounded on the first day and evacuated by helicopter. Those who remained knew. It wasn't a matter of if they would be attacked. It was a matter of when. On the morning of November 21st, the platoon woke up to the familiar sound of AK-47 fire. Kyle and Nick climbed onto the rooftop to secure the perimeter. They lay on their backs behind a circle of sandbags. The sun had barely risen. It was a day like any other, until it wasn't. A fragmentation grenade landed inside the sandbag-enclosed space where Kyle and Nick were. The pin had already been pulled. The internal mechanism was counting down. In fractions of a second it would explode, and in that small enclosed space, the blast would be fatal for both of them. Kyle was positioned on the side of the roof with the hatch open. He could have jumped. He could have gotten out. Marine training is clear in that situation. If you have an exit, you take it. That's what any trained soldier would do. That's what any sane human being would do. He has no memory of what happened next. Pause. What his fellow Marines saw from below, what Corpsman Jarrett Lilly, who was the first to climb onto the roof after the explosion, witnessed with his own eyes, was this. Kyle moved toward the grenade. He threw his own body on top of it, and he absorbed the entire blast with his face and his arm. Lilly later wrote in a report, "I was the first to get on the roof and saw the aftermath. I have no doubt that Kyle jumped on that grenade." The explosion did things to Kyle's body that doctors rarely see in someone who survives. His jaw was shattered. His right arm was blown apart. His right eye was torn out. Most of his teeth were destroyed. A large portion of his face was ripped apart by high-temperature metal fragments. Arteries were severed. His lung collapsed. The Kevlar absorbed part of the impact on his torso, but his face and arm had no protection. The blast tore a hole in the roof beneath him. Nick Eufrazio, the man Kyle had saved, was wounded, but alive. When the others reached the rooftop, Kyle was lying face down, bleeding heavily beneath a plume of gray smoke. Corpsman Lilly did what he could right there. Other Marines carried Kyle down from the roof while AK-47 fire still echoed through the village streets. During the helicopter evacuation, Kyle's heart stopped. The medics brought him back. His heart stopped again. They brought him back again. A third time, Kyle's heart stopped. And a third time, the doctors refused to let him go. When he arrived at the field hospital, Kyle was recorded as dead on arrival. For 7 days, 7 long days that included Thanksgiving, his parents in Gilbert, South Carolina, received only the information that their son had been critically wounded and evacuated. They didn't know if he was alive or dead. They couldn't speak to him. They couldn't get clear answers. On Thanksgiving Day, Robin and Jim Carpenter packed their bags and drove 12 hours to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Stuck in holiday traffic, in silence, with a fear no parent should ever know. Kyle was alive, barely, unrecognizable, but alive. Kyle woke up weeks later in a room at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. He had spent 5 weeks in a coma. He had no memory of Afghanistan. He didn't know what had happened. The first thing he managed to say when he could finally speak was a question. Is Nick okay? His best friend was alive. Kyle closed his remaining eye and took a deep breath. That was enough. What came next was a different kind of war. Longer, quieter, and in some ways, harder than any battle in Marja. Kyle spent 2.5 years at Walter Reed, nearly 40 surgeries, a new jaw rebuilt with titanium plates, new teeth implanted one by one, a glass eye, skin grafts to cover the lacerations, reconstruction of his arm, months of intense physical therapy to learn how to walk again, eat again, tie his shoes again. His father Jim said in an interview, "When I first saw Kyle in the hospital, I didn't think he would have any quality of life, that he would be confined to a bed or a wheelchair forever. But he kept improving, and I slowly got my son back." What that medical team does seems impossible and thankless. It's like Groundhog Day for them, completely broken people arriving every day, and they do the impossible every day. On one of the hardest nights of his recovery, Kyle was alone in his room. He looked at the mirror and asked a question he can still repeat today with a chilling calm. "Look at me. Who's going to love me like this?" But Kyle Carpenter was not the kind of man who stayed down. Over time, as his body began to respond, he went beyond everything his doctors expected. He ran a full marathon, less than 4 years after the grenade, completed a 10-kilometer obstacle race in the mud, skydived, returned to college at the University of South Carolina, and graduated with honors in international studies in 2017, wrote a book, became one of the most sought-after speakers on resilience and leadership in the United States. On June 19, 2014, Kyle stood in the White House. President Barack Obama placed the Medal of Honor around his neck. Kyle was 24 years old, the youngest living recipient of America's highest military decoration. Obama told the room, "Kyle faced that terrible power with his own body, deliberately, to protect a fellow Marine. He was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to save another life." Nick Eufrazio was in the room. When Kyle turned and the two looked at each other, there were no words. There didn't need to be. Kyle Carpenter does not remember the moment that made him a hero. He has no memory of it. But he says he believes there was something in his heart on that rooftop, built over years of family, friendship, and values, that knew, without needing to think, that Nick was worth it. That the life of a brother in arms is worth more than the pain of an explosion. After the ceremony at the White House, Kyle was in an Uber. The driver, an immigrant from Pakistan, recognized him and said the words every veteran hears and rarely knows how to respond to. "Thank you for your service." Kyle usually smiled and nodded, but that day, something different came out. He replied, "You're worth it." The driver looked at him through the rearview mirror for a long moment, then said, "My family came from Pakistan when I was a child. My parents went through hardships I will never understand. But I got an incredible education here, and I feel so grateful to live in what I believe is the best country in the world." Kyle sat in silence in the back seat for a long time. Today, when someone thanks him, Kyle responds with those 2 words, "You're worth it." Not as a phrase, as the deepest truth he learned, on that rooftop, in that hospital, in those 3 years of recovery. "Every scar on my face reminds me of something," Kyle once said. "It reminds me that I was given a second chance, and that second chance came because someone, or something, believed I still had things to do in this world." Kyle Carpenter does not remember the second that made him immortal, but that second happened, and Nick Eufrazio is alive to prove it. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe. There's much more coming.